They said I wasn't good enough. They told me to leave and never come back. So I disappeared and returned holding the deed to their home. 5 years ago, I was told I'd never amount to anything, that I was a burden, that I didn't belong. The last words I heard before walking away were, "Stay gone." So I did, but what they didn't know, I wasn't just leaving. I was building an empire. And when the time came, I didn't just walk back in, I bought my way in. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about proving to yourself that no rejection is final, that you can turn pain into power. And sometimes, the best comeback is owning the very ground they stand on. If you've ever been told you weren't enough, smash the like button and subscribe if you believe in turning rejection into fuel. Being cast aside by the people who are supposed to support you cuts deeper than any failure. It makes you question your worth. But what happens when you stop begging for a seat at their table and build your own? The breaking point. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't even an argument. That's what made it worse. Just a quiet, calculated dismissal. Like I was nothing more than background noise they finally decided to mute. I still remember the way the room felt, heavy with unspoken judgments. The air thick with the kind of silence that screams louder than words. They didn't yell. They didn't need to. All it took was a cold, detached glance, and those 4 words, "Just stay away, okay?" No explanation, no hesitation, just finality. And in that moment, something inside me shattered. Not because I was heartbroken, but because I realized I had spent years begging for scraps of acceptance from people who'd already decided I wasn't worth keeping. That was the breaking point. The second I understood that no amount of effort would ever be enough. So I left. Not dramatically, not with a speech. Just gone. But here's the thing about being pushed out. It forces you to choose. You either collapse under the weight of their rejection, or you use it as a foundation for something unshakable. I chose the latter. That day didn't break me. It woke me up. It was the first time I truly understood that respect isn't given, it's taken. And if they wouldn't see my value, I'd make sure the whole world did. The irony? They thought they were removing me from their story, but they were actually writing mine. Because sometimes the moment they tell you to stay away is the exact moment you start coming back. Stronger. The silence after. The days after leaving were the loudest silence I've ever known. No calls, no messages, no dramatic confrontations. Just a hollow echo of my own footsteps in an empty apartment that didn't feel like home yet. That's when it truly sank in. They meant what they said. This wasn't some temporary exile or test of loyalty. They had erased me from their lives as easily as deleting a contact from their phone. The worst part wasn't even the loneliness. It was the creeping doubt that maybe they'd been right all along. Maybe I wasn't worth fighting for. But then something unexpected happened. In that crushing quiet, I started hearing my own voice again. Not the version they conditioned me to be, but the real one that had been buried under years of trying to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. The silence became my cocoon. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. Stopped checking my phone for messages that would never appear. Instead, I began building something they couldn't ignore. Not with their words, but with actions so undeniable they'd echo louder than any insult ever could. That silence taught me the most valuable lesson. When people show you who they are, believe them. And when they leave you with nothing but quiet, fill it with everything you're capable of becoming. The world tries to define you by who misses you when you're gone. But the truth is, your worth was never determined by who noticed your absence. It's measured by what you create in the empty spaces they thought would break you. The first job, minimum wage and maximum humiliation. That's how the real world greeted me when I stepped out on my own. That first job wasn't just work. It was an education in swallowing pride while the universe tested how badly I wanted to change my story. 12-hour shifts on my feet, hands raw from tasks no one else wanted to do. Coming home to a mattress on the floor of a room I share with 2 strangers. Every aching muscle was a reminder of what I'd left behind. Not the love I'd imagined, but the comfortable lie that someone else would take care of me. The breaking point came one rainy closing shift when my manager threw a stack of unpaid invoices at my chest and said, "Fix this or you're fired." I stood there in my stained uniform, realizing no one was coming to rescue me. That moment crystallized everything. This wasn't rock bottom. This was my foundation. I stayed late that night balancing books I barely understood, Googling accounting terms between coffee refuels, determined to turn desperation into skill. That minimum wage paycheck bought more than ramen noodles. It bought my first real taste of self-reliance. The blisters healed. The hunger didn't. But a different kind of hunger took over, not for their approval, but for my own respect. Looking back, I don't remember the exhaustion as much as I remember the quiet power of depositing that first hard-earned check into an account with only my name on it. Financial independence wasn't just about money. It was the first tangible proof I could survive without them. That job didn't break me. It forged me. Every demeaning task, every overlooked effort, every silent bus ride home became fuel for a fire they'd never see coming. I wasn't working for tips anymore. I was working for a future where no one could dismiss me again. The turning point. The moment of transformation didn't come with fireworks or dramatic revelations. It arrived quietly in the exhausted stillness of another endless night, as I sat on my thrift store couch staring at blisters on my hands from a third consecutive double shift. Something in that mundane moment snapped into focus with terrifying clarity. I could either spend my life resenting those who'd cast me aside or channel that anger into something unstoppable. The realization hit like a physical force. This pain wasn't my enemy. It was my most powerful ally. That night, I made a pact with myself written in the ink of sweat and determination. No more victim mentality. No more waiting for validation from people who'd shown their true colors. I began seeing every slight, every dismissal, every ounce of their doubt as rocket fuel for my ascent. The math became simple. While they slept, I'd study. While they doubted, I'd prepare. While they forgot about me, I'd transform beyond recognition. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about evolution. I dissected my failures like a scientist, turned weaknesses into skills, and most importantly, stopped measuring my progress against their expectations. The world opened up when I realized the game wasn't rigged against me. I'd just been playing by their rules. That shift in perspective became my superpower. No longer the discarded failure. I became the architect of my own destiny. The turning point wasn't marked on any calendar, but in retrospect, it was the day I stopped asking why me and started demanding what's next. The fire they thought would consume me became a forge where I rebuilt myself. Stronger, sharper, and utterly unrecognizable from the person they thought they'd broken. The grind. The grind wasn't glamorous or inspirational. It was alarm clocks screaming at 4:30 a.m. while the world slept. It was frozen dinners eaten over spreadsheets at midnight. It was turning down every invitation because I'm working became my permanent auto-reply to life. My social life evaporated into a haze of secondhand business books and online courses. My apartment walls papered with handwritten notes mapping out financial strategies most people wouldn't attempt without a business degree. What kept me going wasn't motivation. That faded by Wednesday, but the bone-deep knowledge that comfort had betrayed me before and I'd never trusted again. I became a student of the game, analyzing successful people not with envy, but with clinical precision, reverse engineering their paths while creating my own. Weekends disappeared into a cycle of side hustles and skill building. Vacations replaced by networking events where I stood awkwardly in thrift store blazers until confidence grew through sheer repetition. The magic wasn't in any single action, but in the compound interest of daily discipline. Small deposit of effort that eventually yielded returns no one could have predicted. There were moments I nearly broke. When the third coffee of the night stopped working, when my savings account hit double digits, when well-meaning friends asked, "Is this really worth it?" But the alternative, going back to being invisible, to being the afterthought in someone else's story, hurt far worse than any temporary exhaustion. The grind taught me what college never could. That expertise isn't given. It's stolen through thousands of unseen hours. That opportunity favors prepared but punishes the entitled. And that the most powerful form of revenge isn't shouting your success from rooftops. It's building your empire so quietly that when they finally hear about it, you're already untouchable. The first big win. The contract signature didn't feel real at first. Just another document in a pile of papers until the first payment cleared and my bank account balance did something it had never done before. That moment of seeing 5 figures where there used to be double digits triggered a physical reaction, hands shaking, breath catching. the sudden realization that the universe had finally responded to all those sleepless nights. This wasn't luck or some miraculous break. It was the inevitable result of hundreds of rejected proposals, thousands of failed cold calls, and an obsessive refinement of my craft until excellence became involuntary. The win came disguised as an ordinary Tuesday. No fanfare, no dramatic music, just an email with the subject line, "Contract approved," that changed everything. What surprised me most wasn't the money, though finally being able to replace my disintegrating shoes felt divine, but the quiet shift in self-perception. That first victory became psychological proof that the rules actually worked, that disciplined effort could indeed bend reality. Suddenly, all those people who'd said, "It's impossible," seemed small and far away, their doubts now laughable against the evidence of my bank statement. Yet the real lesson came afterward. Success didn't satisfy like I'd imagined. It only made me hungrier. One client became 3, then 10, then a waiting list. The win wasn't the destination, but the doorway. Proof that I belonged at tables I'd once only been allowed to serve. Most importantly, it taught me that opportunity doesn't care about your past, only your present readiness to perform. That first big win didn't just fund my future. It permanently rewired my understanding of what was possible, transforming me from hopeful striver to undeniable contender in an arena where results were the only language that mattered. The discovery. The email notification seemed innocuous at first. Just another property listing from the automated alert I'd set up years ago when first dreaming of real estate investments. But the address made my breath catch in my throat. Fingers freezing mid-scroll as recognition turned to disbelief. Their house. The very walls that had witnessed my dismissal, the floors that had carried me out for what they assumed was the last time, was now being auctioned off to the highest bidder. The poetic justice would have been satisfying enough, but the financial details sent a jolt through me. The numbers worked. Not just barely, but perfectly, falling within reach of what I can now comfortably afford without even straining my accounts. I remember the strange calm that settled over me in that moment, contrasting sharply with the racing thoughts about mortgages and LLC structures. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was simple mathematics, a transaction like any other. The property description listed financial distress as a reason for sale, and I couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry at how neatly life had arranged this reckoning. All those years of being treated like a financial liability had culminated in me becoming the solution to their money problems. Not out of charity, but as a calculated investment. The discovery lit a fire under me, not of vengeance, but of purpose. Suddenly, all those late nights and sacrifice weekends took on new meaning. This was no longer just about building wealth. It was about reclaiming space, both physical and psychological. The house represented more than square footage. It was the ultimate test of whether I had truly moved beyond needing their approval, whether I could make this purchase with the cold precision of a business person rather than the wounded emotions of the person they'd once cast aside. The keyboard waited under my fingers, the decision already made before my conscious mind caught up. I would own that house, not for them, but for the version of me who had once walked away with nothing but determination. The power move. The paperwork felt heavier than it should have, not from physical weight, but from the gravity of what those signatures represented. I'd structured everything through an anonymous LLC, not out of cowardice but strategy, ensuring the transaction would remain invisible until I chose the moment of revelation. My lawyer thought I was being overly cautious about privacy. Only I understood this was about controlling the narrative one final time. Transferring the down payment triggered memories of counting coins for ramen noodles in that first apartment. The surreal contrast between past scarcity and present capability making my hand steady as I authorized a wire transfer. Every step was executed with clinical precision, property inspections negotiated, closing documents reviewed, all while maintaining complete radio silence with anyone connected to that house. The power wasn't in the purchase itself, but in the absolute restraint shown afterward. I could have stormed it immediately, keys jingling like some dramatic movie scene, but true victory required patience. Instead, I waited 3 weeks after closing, letting them continue living there unaware, letting the universe's irony marinate to perfection. During that time, I walked past the house just once at twilight, watching through the windows as their lives continued unchanged, oblivious to the seismic shift about to occur. That moment of observation cemented my resolve. This wasn't petty revenge, but a reclamation of power on my terms. The final step came when I had the property deed professionally framed, not as a trophy, but as documentation of a promise kept to myself. All those years of being told I wouldn't amount to anything had led to this single transaction that disproved every limitation they tried to impose. The true power move wasn't buying the house. It was having the discipline to handle the entire process without emotional outbursts, letting the facts speak for themselves. When the time came to reveal the truth, there would be no denials possible, no rewriting of history, just cold, hard paperwork with my name where there's used to be. The return. The morning air carried a crispness that felt ceremonious as I turned onto that familiar street, the weight of the keys in my palm both foreign and rightful. I'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my mind, yet nothing prepared me for the visceral punch of seeing that front door again, not as a supplicant, but as an owner. My knock echoed with deliberate calm, each second before the door opened stretching into eternity, charged with the electricity of a reckoning years in the making. When the door finally swung inward, the confusion on her face lasted only a heartbeat before recognition set in, then morphed into something more complex. Disbelief shading into dawning comprehension as they registered my tailored suit, my unshakable posture, the quiet authority radiating from someone they remembered as insignificant. I didn't need to say anything at first. The keys dangling from my fingers spoke volumes. Their eyes dropped to that glinting metal, then back to mine, the silent exchange conveying everything. The power shift was absolute. When I finally spoke, my voice carried none of the tremors they might have expected, just steady certainty. I believe you have 30 days to vacate. The beauty of that moment wasn't in any dramatic outburst or tearful confrontation, but in the sublime simplicity of justice served cold. Their spluttered questions about how this could possibly have happened mattered less than profound personal closure unfolding within me. This homecoming wasn't about their humiliation. It was about my emancipation. As I walked through rooms that had once made me feel small, I realized their greatest miscalculation. They'd assumed casting me out would diminish me, when in truth, exile had been the forge where I rediscovered my own strength. The house hadn't changed, but I had. And that transformation made all the difference between the person who'd left in shame and the one who now held the deed. The real victory. The deed was signed. The keys exchanged. But the most profound moment came weeks later when I sat alone in what was now legally my property, surrounded by the echoes of their departure. I expected to feel triumphant, to revel in some imagined vengeance, but the dominant emotion was something far more surprising: indifference. Their frantic attempts to contact me afterward, the sudden interest in reconciliation now that I held material power over them, all of it rang hollow against the quiet certainty of my own worth. The house wasn't the trophy I'd anticipated. It was merely brick and mortar. The true victory revealed itself in subtle ways. The ability to walk through those rooms without old wounds reopening, the realization that their opinions no longer held weight in my psyche, the peaceful certainty that I'd broken free from needing their validation. I didn't evict them immediately, not out of weakness, but from a place of secure detachment, granting reasonable time to relocate, because true power doesn't require cruelty. When they finally moved out, I had the locks changed not to keep them out, but as symbolic closure to that chapter. Renovations began immediately, not just the walls and floors, but to the very energy of the space, transforming what was once a place of rejection into a blank canvas for new beginnings. The greatest triumph wasn't owning the house they'd lived in. It was discovering I'd outgrown the need for their approval long before the paperwork was signed. Their shocked expressions when they learned the truth had been satisfying in the moment, but paled in comparison to the deep, abiding knowledge that I'd proven something far more important to myself than to them. This wasn't a story about getting even. It was about getting free. The final victory lap came when I realized I could walk away from that house tomorrow without regret, because my worth was never tied to an address or a transaction, but to the unshakable self-belief forged in those years of struggle. The property was just a symbol. The real estate that truly mattered was the territory I'd reclaimed within myself. The door opened. There they stood, same judgmental eyes, same tight-lipped frowns. Then I held up the keys. Remember when you said I'd never own anything? Funny how life works. This wasn't about revenge. It was about rewriting the narrative. Too often, We let rejection define us when it should refine us. That house, it's just brick and mortar. The Ray Alwyn was looking in the mirror and knowing I didn't just survive, I thrived. If you're hearing no right now, remember, every you can't is a setup for a future I did. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Build in silence. Let your results speak. And if life gives you the chance to own the very thing they said you'd never have, take it. Not out of spite, but as a reminder, you were always worthy. You just had to believe it first. If this story hit home, hit subscribe. Your comeback is coming, and I'll be here to see it. The people who underestimate you are the same ones who later ask how you did it. Don't waste time explaining. Keep building.